All right, we're back. Hi, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. So I'm here with Farah. Thank you so much, Farah, for taking time out. So yeah, let's do a bit of coaching together.
Okay. Ready.
So Farah, what would serve you today?
Oh, that's an interesting question, isn't it? I guess I'll speak about the some of the tasks that I had planned that I've done today. I've had a couple of coaching sessions this morning already, and I suppose really what would serve me would be to find a way in which to debrief myself, I guess, and have a structured way of taking a session, debriefing, maybe reflecting upon it, perhaps some of the questions maybe to ask myself as to how it went, and really putting that forward into a kind of tips for next time and the learning that I've gained, and also a manner in which to record it for the next session when I speak to the client again, because the sessions that I have this week are the first in a series of 3. So just ways in which to record and kind of what questions can I ask myself really as to make a better experience for both myself and the client, inshallah, next time.
All right, yeah, that's a great question. So before we go in there, and I can share a few things that I do that's really helped me grow in that area. Tell me a little bit more, like what is behind the question?
Thinking about it now, it's usually after I've had a session, and I've now learnt that really to not pack in my day with too many sessions, or at least have a significant amount of time between the sessions, because it gets really draining and it gets really tiring, and it feels like if I have sessions one after the other, I don't have time to kind of come down really. So it feels like as soon as I'm into my next session, I'm almost at the tip of a roller coaster that I'm going to be riding with my next client. So before, I guess what's under that question is how can I be better? How can I serve my next client better and give the best of me really? What can I do? What questions, I guess, can I ask myself? How should I be reflecting, and how should I be monitoring how I've done, so that I can serve them more powerfully next time?
I love the question. And it's a great question to ask, right? Because often we're looking at, well, how can I sign up more people, or how can I make more money? And actually, the beautiful thing about it starts here, right? Because the more impactful we become as a coach, the more powerful we become, right? The faster our business grows. Because it's through that powerful experience that people say yes to us. Yeah. All right, cool. So let's dive into it. So, okay. So here's so there's different frameworks that I've seen different people use. I've seen over time people use different frameworks, but what's been really useful for me is asking, is this framework? So whenever I look at anything that I do, I usually ask, what was awesome? What needs work? And what would I do different?
Yeah. Okay.
Right? And when we look at that, we can take any session into isolation. And here's the cool thing, by the way. We can have this as a little template. So I used to have these coaching session templates, and at the bottom of that, those questions were already there. So I typed up a template, and I would just copy paste it with every new client. So there was a template. And then we can just make notes on those templates. But you might be making notes in a different way. Do you use pen and paper?
I do. I record the
Yeah.
sessions over Zoom, and then I've got a little note and paper just to take in some of the things that I might think I forget. So yeah.
All right, cool. Yeah, and I assume a lot of coaches do it like that. It's either pen and paper. Some people, nowadays we have iPads and pens. It's very similar. So one thing could be is to find a way to remind yourself of these questions,
Yeah.
right? So initially I had it on a piece of paper, on a template, so it was already there. So the moment I finished my session, I would go down and say, okay, this is my reflection time. And here's the thing, by the way, it starts with, your question is great about, what is the structure so I can debrief effectively, but it also starts with actually having time to do that,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't serve us as coaches to go from session to session without breaks, right? Because then we become robotic. And then I think personally, I also think it affects our presence, and how, yeah, just really how present we are in that conversation, and how well we do as coaches. So having time between sessions is one key thing. Some some like to have 30 minutes. I prefer to have 60 minutes between sessions, right? So, and yeah, 60 minutes is a long time, but it also depends on the kind of game you want to play. If you want to just coach a lot of people, that's fine. You could have 30 minutes in between sessions. I prefer to work with a smaller group of people, but at a higher fee,
Yeah. Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And create impact there. And as you're part of one of our groups, in our groups, so we can we can also have a group of people where we work with people together. And I think it's so essential to have at least 30 minutes before a session and at least 30 minutes after a session, so that 30 minutes before we can take some time out and look at those notes. And here's the thing, if you have 5 pages of notes, it can take a bit of time to read through that, right? But often it's all you need to do is look at, maybe you could highlight a few things. So that's one thing that could be really useful. Highlight some key points out of your session, and then read that last part. Read that part, because that part really reminds you of what was good about that session, right? And then it also reminds you of what needs work. And I'll give you some examples in a bit. And it also reminds you of what you would do different.
Yeah.
And by the way, these are questions that even professional athletes ask themselves. After every performance, we can ask ourselves, and we can do this also. I do this even at the end of a day, and I ask myself a general question about my day. And it might be that, what, it was really good. I spent some time with the kids, but what needs work, I need to be present and not have my phone with me.
Yeah.
In fact, now my daughter, she's almost 3, right? She will just say, Daddy, can you put your phone can you put your phone away? And she has a plastic toy phone, and she says, I'm gonna put my phone away as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because she already understands that, when we have these devices, we're not present,
Not at all.
right? So we can improve every area of our life by just asking these simple questions. If we're tired in the morning, we can look back at the day before and see like, hey, you know what? Yesterday was great. I had a great working day, but I slept too late. So I need, that needs work. I need to sleep a bit earlier, or, you know, let's not have a meal that late anymore. Right? So this framework is actually really powerful, and you can use it in any area of life. So if you come back to the coaching session, so if you look back at one of your sessions, and would it be useful maybe to actually just do this in a few minutes in for one of your sessions?
Yeah.
So it's not just theory, we'll put it into practice right away.
Lovely.
And I often do this with coaches inside sessions. And especially doing this with proposals really helps you get better at it. So with coaching and with proposals, because these are skills, when we just keep doing the practice and we don't review it, we will get better. Just by coaching, you'll get better at it. Just by making proposals, you get better at it. But by having that debriefing, by, when and it really comes from the world of sports. They call it game film there,
Yeah.
right? They'll watch the recording of a game and they replay it. right? And they look at the different things that went well. So let's do that. Let's do the game film with one of your sessions today. So number one, pick one session that you had.
I will actually. I'll pick the session I had this morning.
Yeah, cool. So number one, what was awesome about it?
The rapport seemed to happen quite quickly. The lady that I was speaking to, I could tell was quite not used to really speaking, and not used to speaking about herself, essentially. And I got that feeling quite early on, and it was in the body language, it was in her, the way that she was looking down, and it was kind of telling me that she wasn't feeling very comfortable at this moment. And so it was surprising me to me then that the rapport and the ease kind of happened quite quickly, even though at first I'd kind of had it in my head, oh, this looks like this might be a little bit of a challenge. I need to hopefully help this lady feel at ease, because nothing's going to come out if she doesn't feel comfortable. But subhanallah, what I guess the most awesome thing was that she was able to be free, be honest, and actually say a lot of things that maybe she's not actually ever had a chance to say before. So yeah, the rapport building and the platform and the safe space was created,
Yeah.
I felt, quite quickly and quite effectively.
Yeah, that's great. So what I'm hearing is, she felt a bit uncomfortable, and you noticed that, and so you build a rapport, you build a safe space. Maybe what would be good is to go a level deeper and think, what are some of the things that you did to create that safe space, to build that rapport?
I guess thinking about it now, I was recording the session, and I explained to her that it was purely for my benefit. It wasn't it wasn't to be shown anywhere, and that if she felt more comfortable, I would, if she wanted, stop recording. And she said, no, that's fine. I said it was there was a complete trust. It's confidential. There's absolutely no judgment. There's nothing that I'm going to take forward from this and stamp a kind of judgment on her parenting or on her. So establishing that it was completely confidential, there was no judgment involved, and that she, it would impact her more if she was able to be as honest and open. It would benefit her, really. And she saw that. And also, she's seen a couple of the lives that I've done before, and she attended a workshop. So I carried on that kind of style of conversation and inviting her in, and also not filling the gaps when I'd asked a question and asked her opinion on it, and there was a little bit of an awkward silence. Not filling the gap, just giving her that space, really, to say what was going on.
Okay, I love that. Yeah, so here are a few things you mentioned. You set up a powerful frame for the conversation, a coaching frame, right? To remind her, hey, this is a safe space, it's confidential. If you want, we can turn the recording off, right? So that builds the trust there, right? And then you mentioned the silences, right? Cool. So let's go to the next part. The next part is what needs work.
The timing, I think I had penciled in an hour, and I'd allowed myself a buffer of 30 minutes. So I'd explained from the off that we will need at least an hour, and explained all the kind of stipulations. Kindly come to the session without any kind of distractions, and really come wanting to play full out. And the session went over the buffer. It went into 2.5 hours, and I had one of my sessions booked on after that. So what didn't go so well was my ability to actually control, and maybe instead of carrying on for as long as we did, maybe ending the session a bit shorter and taking it up on the next session. So timing is what I could have done better.
Okay, cool. What else?
When the subject of paying, because it was a it was the first initial conversation. So I had offered it as a gift for attending the workshop. So this was a complimentary one. And it was one of 3 complimentary ones that I had planned out. But the subject of money came up in this one. So what I could have done better, actually, when she said, "Oh, I'm willing to pay for the next one," is actually then provide a kind of more coherent and more packaged way of how that could happen. But what I did was I slowed it down and bypassed the whole money thing, and just said, "Oh, well, we don't need to talk about that right now. The next one is complimentary. That in the next session, I'd like to go a bit deeper, and then I'm quite happy to talk to you about the ways in which we can work together." And but I know that I did kind of sidestep the whole money thing quite quickly. So what I could do better next time is maybe find an avenue of navigating that part a little bit more smoothly.
Okay. Yeah. And thank you for being so honest. Right. Is there anything else that you feel needs work? You mentioned the timing, so there was 60 minutes there with a little bit of buffer of 30 minutes of buffer, but then you went towards 2 hours.
Yeah.
So were you late for your next session?
Thank goodness I wasn't. My next session had actually, in the time that we were on the call, my next session had said that she was running late. So I thought, oh, well, she's all right then, this is fine.
Okay.
But this has been an issue before. So I guess because I kind of got the permission, if you like, because my next session was, running late, I felt it wasn't so much of a thing. But thinking about it now, I should have stuck to the hour with the buffer of 30 minutes explaining how we can pick up on these things that we haven't had the time to go through today in our next session, and use that buffer to allow a smoother transition, rather than at the end of 2 hours thinking, saying, "Oh, well, we've come to the end of almost 2 hours, so let's pick this up next time." And it was a kind of a shorter transition.
Yeah.
But I wasn't late for it, no, because my next appointment was running late anyway.
Okay, cool. All right, so if you get a chance to do this again, right, what would you do different?
I would set out a clearer expectation as well for myself as well, actually. So whilst I'm talking about the explaining how the coaching session is going to be framed, and with the timing especially, as taking more notice of it for myself as well, a note to self. Also keeping an eye on the time more so, and having the timer right by me, because I hadn't looked at the clock, and when I realised, it was like, oh my goodness, it's now 2 hours. So having maybe an alarm perhaps go off an hour afterwards, like a softer alarm, just to give me the heads up that this is coming to our time. So that's with regards to the timing. Yeah, I think that it was the main issue was the timing. And what could I do different next time? Have a clearer way in which I can address the issue of payment, or being involved in a paid program, as kind of a smoother way to either address that or allude to it.
Yeah. All right, cool. So two things, maybe having a way to remind you of the time, right? And then you mentioned having some clarity around how that money conversation would go. Cool. All right. So this is the exercise. Was it useful for you to do this?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Because after that whole, it felt like a long mammoth session, and it was draining, actually, because at times, actually, I should have said this for the part that what I could do better next time. There were moments, and I did catch myself, but there were moments that I was almost riding the roller coaster with her, and I had to bring myself back. And at that moment, it was almost like I was feeling the feels that she was, coming up with. And for a couple of times, I checked myself and I could imagine myself, because what she was saying was resonating with me a lot, so much, and I could really relate to what she was talking about. And I had to stop myself saying, this is not my session, this is not my story, this is hers. So instead of thinking, oh yeah, I felt that, oh my goodness, and really bringing it back to the present. So I guess just really being present, I suppose. But I felt as if I was present, but I did catch myself in one or two times riding that roller coaster. So at the end of the session, I did feel quite drained, and I really didn't want to have to think about it really. So if I'd done this little exercise straight after or whilst I was in the session, that would have been a job done and dusted kind of thing. It would have been, at least my notes would have been fresh, and I could have really seen it more clearly straight away. But I'm glad that we're having this session today, because
Yeah.
it's only a couple of hours after.
Mm. Yeah. And this is the great thing about it, right? You see, as we're coming to the end of this exercise, more things came up. And I think these are the things that, these are the things that are really useful. Right? So let me do what I normally do, right? So we look at it, you mentioned what was awesome. There's great rapport, there's a safe space that helped her open up. You create a clear framework for the session. There's a silence there in between, right? What needs work, the timing needs work. You went late for the last session, for the next session, but you could have been late, right? And by the way, like, just to share this, this used to happen a lot to me in my first year, right? And not, when I mean a lot, like, I used to coach sometimes 5-6 sessions a day, and it would happen all the time, right? And it's this framework that helped me shift that. And also receiving a lot of coaching, my coaches helped me see that it's not about just me giving more time, right? But I noticed by doing this exercise, I noticed that, I'm not really serving myself by always giving more time. Because when I'm rushing into the next session, I'm not as present. I don't get a break for eating, sometimes not even a break for toilet, right? And, when you're just sitting there, your energy shifts as well, right? So movement is also really important, right? So by doing this exercise, imagine if you just look over this, if you would have this in front of you, right? And you would just look at it before the next session, it's just such a powerful reminder for you to, hey, these were things that were good. Let me just create them again, right? Because we want to do the things that are good. We want to repeat them. And then you're aware of the timing, right? And you look very quickly at the things you would do different. And rather than just that to be an idea, you can say, well, hey, what am I going to do about it? And there are so many ways to remind yourself of. Nowadays with Zoom, there's an option now in that corner of my Zoom screen. It shows me how long the session is currently running.
Okay.
Right? Another thing is, of course, you could have the time, on your laptop or on your phone.
Yeah.
There are so many different ways. We can have timers on, on our phone, or nowadays you have timers on the watch. Well, where there's, it just buzzes and nobody else notices. Right? I know, like, one of the trainers in the coaching school, in the Animas coaching school, shared that he would just have a silent timer that would buzz in his pocket. And that was an indication for him that the session is coming to an end.
Yeah.
And he would put that, I think, 10 minutes before the end.
Yeah.
So you have a chance to wrap up. Because here's the thing, like, as we often think that we're serving more powerfully by giving more time, that we're giving more value, but time doesn't equal value,
No.
especially not in the kind of work that we do.
Yeah, I see that so clearly. But much like yourself, trying to book in as many calls as I could during the day, and by the end of it, just feeling, quite tired, but also, like you said, serving people powerfully. I don't think I did really, to be honest. Really, it was quantity over quality, hands down. So something that shifted is reducing the amount of calls per day to, sometimes it's just one, and I'm quite happy with that, subhanallah, because it gives me a chance to reflect more on it. But yeah, it's definitely better.
Yeah, and here's the thing, right? It's also about the type of coach that you want to be, right? I know you for I think over a year now, and you've done a lot of work on yourself as a coach, and you're a powerful coach. And what you want to do is slow down and coach around, insights, not around information, right? Because one insight can change someone's life. And sometimes when that insight drops, all we can do is we can just slow down the whole conversation. And sometimes that's enough to actually just wrap up even the whole conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's not like there's got to be at least, I don't know, 5 landmark moments in a conversation, or it has to be that they're coming out of it like, oh no, my goodness, you have changed my life. It's like you say, it's the little ones that have the biggest impact, mashallah. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so here's, and did you see, like, it just took us a few minutes,
mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So, like a simple thing that you could do is I open up. So if you would have a session and it's, let's say, one, session one, before before session two, I would just go over my notes and look especially at the end. I might have highlighted a few other areas,
Mm-hmm.
but I will go first to the end.
Yeah.
And here's a fun fact. Like, I used to write down in what needs work. I used to write down all the time: talk less, listen more.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, it gets so annoying that I would, I'll put it on a post-it note in front of me while I was coaching someone. And actually, Steve, right, Steve Chandler, he shared with me that he would have this big sign on the wall behind the client, and it would say, "Why are you talking?"
That's quite powerful. Yeah, that's the kind way of saying be quiet, sharp.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm sharing my personal experience, this is not about me, right? And this is not so much about Steve, but I'm sharing that because you're not alone in this. Sometimes, we all go through this, and we need to remind ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
that maybe we need to talk less, or we need to remind ourselves of the time,
Yeah.
right? So these are little things, by the way, and it's not about, you know, and I love this question that you came into this conversation with, because when you make these small improvements, right? When you keep making small improvements, in a year time, there'll be a big there'll be a big shift in the impact you're making, and there will be also, and because you become more effective as a coach, you become more impactful, you serve more powerfully, your results, will, you get better results, and your income will increase with that, because income is a reflection of the impact we create.
Yeah.
And that's, business is full of paradoxes, right? We all want to help more people, we all want to make more money, but this is where it starts.
Absolutely.
So does this feel doable?
it does, and it feels very, not timely, not time consuming. And if I've got that on my framework already, and then highlighting it and going back to it, it absolutely feels doable. I'm, paper and pen kind of person. So,
Yeah.
that is, the visual, and also thinking about it now, maybe having, and I think you suggested this before, having maybe some sticky notes, post-it notes
Yeah.
on my screen, just as a little reminder.
Yeah, exactly. Like I always have some post-it notes lying around here, but you could have them and you could just stick it on your desk so you can see it every day.
Yeah, there's something quite powerful in that. So yes, I definitely
Yeah,
do.
and because we need to just remind ourselves, right? If you look at our daily practices in our deen, a lot of it is about bringing us back, towards the service, towards worshiping Allah, right? And what we want to do here is we want to bring ourselves back and remind ourselves like, hey, I need space between sessions, right? Because then I'm more impactful, then my cup is full, right? Because if you just have that little bit of space where you do this maybe for 5 minutes, then you just relax for 15 minutes. And that relaxing, ideally, we want to move our body,
Yeah.
right? You know, yeah, it's not to advertise anything, but I recently got this Fitbit, and at the end of every hour, when there's 10 minutes left, it buzzes. And it reminds me to walk 250 steps every day, like every hour. Not every day, every hour. And that's just walking 5 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when I do that, my energy goes up and I'm moving,
Yeah, because I
right?
have found, yeah, when you don't, and you can, like you say, finding yourself doing session after session, and you sat in the same place for sometimes over 3-4 hours, and you can
Yeah,
feel that energy in your body just like sinking. But
yeah.
absolutely,
And there are many books written around this that, that we want to oscillate. But it means the idea is basically we want to have 60, 60 to 90 minutes where we're turned on,
mm-hmm.
so we're focused, and then we want to have at least 7 to 20 minutes where we're switched off. And when we do that, right, we can again switch on for 60 to 90 minutes and be really focused, be really productive, and be really present.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes if you have like a 2.5, and you know, when you have a 2 hour session, and sometimes 2 hour sessions can be really powerful, but you can still have a little break there,
Yeah.
right? And here's the thing: when you have that again and again, you might not notice it, but your presence is going down. Your effectiveness as a coach will decrease,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what's really important is to have that space, 7 to 20 minutes. And this is the science that backs this up, right? And by the way, the 7 to 20 minutes means also that's ideally 7 to 20 minutes where we switch off. So no devices, no phone, you know, we don't look at anything else. And that's, by the way, really, really powerful to, and if you're willing to experiment with this, try that out. And also really put this into practice before, at the end of your coaching day, before you go to your kids,
Yeah.
before you go to your husband,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or for anyone listening, before you just move to another activity, we want to have a bit of space where we kind of wrap up. When you do this exercise, also what it does, it creates a little bit of closure with that session. So you're not just sitting there with your loved ones and thinking, well, what if I did this? Oh, I went over. Oh, this. And you just kind of wrap it up nicely. And we just want to have a moment where we just breathe and relax and let go of that energy, because we often carry energy with us from activity to activity.
Yes, absolutely. And I can see that when I've had coaching session after coaching session, it's taking that energy from the previous one into the
Yeah.
next one. And so yeah, this this is a very easy way of debriefing and de-stressing and just yeah, letting go of it. Yeah.
Mm. And so we have a little bit more time, right? I know this is the question that you came with,
Mm.
and I think you find that it is doable. This is something that you can put into practice,
Yeah.
right? And there is something. Are you open to look at actually? So when I normally do this with clients, right? We do this exercise. So this exercise will inform. So this exercise informs you of what was good, what needs work, what you can do different. But then if you're willing, we can actually go a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
We can actually look at some of these things, right? So you mentioned something. You mentioned the roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
That when the client's going in an emotional roller coaster, you're going with them. And you mentioned you felt drained at the end. Does that happen regularly?
No, no. I think, to be honest, early on in my coaching journey, it did, and it did seem to happen quite a lot, and I couldn't quite. I know it's so obvious now, but at the time I couldn't quite understand why. I felt as if it had been my coaching session that I had divulged all of this stuff, and that stopped quite a long time ago. But I do still catch myself every so often. It doesn't happen often, but there are moments. I'm able to bring myself back a lot quicker, but there are moments, and I think it's when I hear something, because because I'm a parenting coach and I hear a lot of the struggles of mums, and it's just when I catch myself thinking, I know exactly how that feels, but in that moment I can see that I'm actually doing a disservice because I don't know how it feels for them. I know how that scenario made me feel at the time, and so in the times that it does happen now, like I say, I'm able to catch myself. But before, I did find myself riding a roller coaster. I think because I hadn't addressed the issues for myself back then.
Yeah.
And so that's, I'm working for myself, subhanAllah, that's been an amazing thing. So that I'm not bringing my issues to the coaching session. So in answer to your question, it doesn't happen often
Okay.
now. And the times that it does, it's kind of, yeah, I can catch myself doing it a lot quicker. But it still does happen. If I'm honest, it does still happen.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. So you've done the inner work already. And that's what enables us to, hold space for other people. Yeah. And, it's a sign, that, number one, you're a human being, right? We will feel because we care, right? So what is something that you can do here to even, take that, for example, to make that even 5% less? So you mentioned it used to happen more. Now it doesn't really happen frequently, but sometimes it happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to make it even happen less than it is now, maybe a bit of a reminder. Again, maybe even on a post-it note. This is not your story. And also, it's almost like I've got these little trigger words. It seems that as soon as I hear a mum say, "I don't feel like I'm good enough," that's when that's like, well, it's almost like my kryptonite. It's like, oh my goodness, no, 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 no. And so, yeah, so just knowing that that is not my story. It's not my story. It never was, but it's certainly not anymore. So yeah, a little reminder to myself that when I'm engaging in a coaching session, to be present, but to see that person's story for the way that they're telling it, and don't relate it to myself. And I know, that sounds like, that's easy, just remind yourself. But I think for it to really be impactful is to have what you've just done or just spoken about the way in which you do something after a session. And I think you did mention when you're preparing for a session to have that almost space freeing time before a session. Use that to really, for me, to really brain dump what's going on for me then, so that I am approaching the session from a place of, this is absolutely nothing to do with me. It's all about the other person. So yeah, a reminder to myself to have a pre-debrief of the session.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. So you want to, so you could remind yourself that, well, this is not my story, right? And the second thing is, you know, this might help you, is to remind yourself that it is just a story.
Yeah.
Right? Because even if it's knowing that it's not our story, if we also just remember that it's a story, we don't also buy into their story. And by the way, like, you know, I say this with a lot of love and care, because it doesn't always serve to the client to just say, well, that's a story, let go of that. Because sometimes people have that for months or years,
Yeah.
right? But when we're really present and we remember that it is a story, it's easier for us to coach them on that and help them shift that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. It's like digging deeper and seeing, like you say, it wouldn't be very impactful if I, was to say, well, that's just the story that you made up. But for a lot of the mums that I speak to, that story is very much how they identify. It's their reality. It's their it's their world. But it's helping them see how that's come about and doing So that definitely helps reframe how I deflect from me, because it's not about me. So yeah, helping them see.
Yeah, exactly. So I know you do work around the 3 principles, and I think it's really powerful. And Byron Katie is very similar. Her work's very similar. Are you familiar with her work?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's that, right? It's just we can come from a very loving place. We don't need to, it's not about bringing our ego into it, right? But when we have that certainty, and again, that comes from having our own, having that space for ourselves, so we can be really present in whatever way that is. But sometimes by just having that space before the sessions, it can enable us to drop really and be present.
Yeah. It's a difference between going into a session with a whole lot of thinking already, going into a place of curiosity, or from a place of curiosity and real presence. So yeah, I can see the benefits in that completely.
All right. So as we're coming towards the end of this conversation, let me slow down and ask you, what's been one or two insights for you?
Just the importance of the impact that it's. Well, I knew this, but it's really hit home today. Really, the importance of quality over quantity, and to be able to serve powerfully. I don't have to serve 10 people in one day to prove my salt as a coach. If I can serve one person, but really powerfully, and from a place of clarity, from a place of love, really, then alhamdulillah, I'm happy with that. But also to be merciful to myself as well, because I think sometimes not just as mums, but as a person, expecting a lot of myself and thinking that I should be doing more. But actually, it's not doing less, it's doing what I do more impactfully and more powerfully, and actually giving myself the downtime. And I love the science that that you said, that the downtime, the 7 minutes of downtime, it's almost like a charging of your batteries. It boosts you to be able to go for longer. so for the 60 to the 90 minutes. Whereas I'd kind of had it the other way around. It was like, you know, work, coach, or, you know, get really, really bogged down and not even have a break, if at all, you know, 2 minutes if I'm lucky, and then straight on, and then wondering why I'm feeling so drained. So yeah, to slow it down, to coach less but more impactfully and more powerfully, and to be merciful to myself. They were, yeah, two things I've taken from this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Cool. And looking at that, what are one or two things that you can put into practice?
The timing, definitely the timer. So maybe not an audible timer, a vibrating timer, and also not trying to pack so much into one session and allowing it to take its course. So really having a kind of a flow into, okay, we can pick up on that next time, allowing that there will be a next time, and that there is a next time, and I don't have to, you know, coach all at once. And also the debriefing, so the framework, the debrief framework, and those 3 questions after each session. Definitely will be implementing that, because it just seems like such a clear and concise way of one, debriefing, one, being merciful to myself, but also getting the best of that session and really pointing out the pertinent points so that I can read over them before the next session, and that being a way of preparing for the next session and not just you know, going into it blind almost. So yeah, they're things that I can definitely implement.
All right, awesome. Cool. And this is also for whoever is listening or watching this, you know, share with us in the comments what's been one insight that you got, and what's one action that you're going to put into practice, no matter how small it is. And yeah, again, thank you, Farah, for playing with me. You know, it sounds, you know, that there are a lot of things that came up in today's session, and I think, you know, it's great to see what you're doing, because the work you're doing is so important. So yeah, keep it up, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Take care. Bye.